Hi, Mark Donovan here from Falcon Imagery, and today I'm going to go over some of the highlights with the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act that was signed into law by the President in May of 2024. There are a lot of good benefits in there for the general aviation community, particularly as it relates to light, sport, and basic med. Really kind of helps to open the door for those two areas for both aircraft and pilot. And we'll talk a little bit in detail about that, but we'll also cover some of the other major highlights as it relates to general aviation. So follow along. Okay, we're going to go over how the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act affects the general aviation community. So this Reauthorization Act was signed into law by the President of the United States on May 16th, 2024. It is associated with the House Representative Bill 3935. Basically authorizes the FAA with $105 billion in funding out through 2028. The act is about 1,000 pages in length. It's quite extensive. I'm only talking here or summarizing some of the major highlights as it relates to the general aviation community. And to that point, out of that $105 billion, there's about $4 billion set aside for the general aviation airport community, up from $3.35 billion in the last Reauthorization Act. So again, the Act provides $4 billion in funding for the general aviation airports. It expands basic med. We'll get into all of the details on some of this in the subsequent pages. It provides additional designated pilot examiner oversight and coordination to address the shortage we have with DPEs and the availability of them. It also addresses flight instructor certificates or certification, particularly as it relates to renewal. So there's improvements coming in there, it looks like. It also directs the FAA to develop an Airman's Medical Bill of Rights, not just a pilot's Bill of Rights, but an Airman's Medical Bill of Rights. It helps to eliminate and reduce aircraft registration backlog, which can take a long time in many cases nowadays. It also helps to ensure safe landings during off-airport operations. And lastly, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the modernization of special airworthiness certification rulemaking, or Mosaic, for the light sport. That's a big area that the community, both in the aircraft and the pilots, have been looking for. That's really, I think, going to help expand the general aviation world with some of the changes that are being proposed here by the FAA. So in regards to the $4 billion for general aviation airports, again, up from $3.35 billion, basically this is going to provide about $1 billion in funding every year to maintain airports and to improve airports, particularly smaller GA airports, basically to fix and improve them and lengthen them in some cases. It's obviously going to address the need for improved airport parking ramps for more planes and transient parking opportunities. So often you go to a small FBO or airport and find that there's really no place for you to park. You're kind of singled out for the jet community. $34 million per year in small airport fund for, again, construction of this itinerant and transient GA parking problem. They're also going to help fund for the protection of small GA airports from closure. So there's going to have to be, let's say, a higher threshold to meet for airports to be closed, just because a neighboring housing development or community has an issue with it that may not be sufficient enough to get an airport closed. So that's going to be a good thing, I think, for the GA community. Improvement in online transparency of prices and fees for all aircraft. You know, we've seen it in a number of cases where you arrive at an airport, an FBO, charges some outrageous amount of money for you to either park on the ramp or landing fee, etc. And not so necessarily that these prices are going to change, but at least you're going to have more transparency so you're not so shocked when you arrive at the airport. Solar power lights. It looks like they're going to really invest in making solar power be used for powering the lights around the airport. 100 low-level fuel. If an FBO is currently selling it, they are basically authorized, they can sell it to at least 2030 or in Alaska 2032. So if you're currently selling it as an FBO or a person or company, you're able to continue to do so until 2030 or until an alternate is generally available. Basic med expansion. So the limit before on the max gross weight of an aircraft under basic med was 6,000. It's being bumped up to 12,500, over 100% increase. Increases the number of passengers from 5 to 6. and increases the number of seats on the aircraft up to 7. Since Basic Med went into effect in 2017, approximately 80,000 pilots have qualified under it. So it's been a real boon for the general aviation community to provide Basic Med, and then by expanding it in this way for higher aircraft weight and increased passengers, even just one, it really does help open the doors for expansion of the GA community. The DPE Oversight and Coordination addresses the National Office for DPE Coordination and shortages of DPEs and requires FAA to establish an office to provide oversight and facilitate national coordination of DPEs. This is a big issue in the flight training community. I was attending a conference not too long ago, the Redbird Migration Conference, and they were reporting the average wait time from when a person was ready for a check ride to when they actually had the check ride was 42 days. And so hopefully through this DPE oversight and coordination that'll be orchestrated through the FAA, we can hopefully bring those wait times down, because those wait times translates into a lot more money for students to spend maintaining their proficiency until the check ride. Flight instructor certificates. So requires the FAA to issue a final rule requiring the FAA to remove the expiration date on a flight instructor certificate. So with this act, they're basically telling the FAA, you need to do something different than absolutely requiring a new certificate be applied for every 2 years for flight certification or flight instruction. So the FAA is proposing to amend the flight instructor certificate renewal requirements by changing the existing renewal requirements to recent experience requirements and adding a new method for person or persons to establish recent flight instructor experience. So it sounds like going forward, based on a certain amount of meeting thresholds of current flight instruction experience, you may be able to renew your license without having to go take an EFIR course or something similar. FAA to develop Airman's Medical Bill of Rights. So this is going to direct the FAA to develop an Airman's Medical Bill of Rights that details the rights of an individual before, during, and after a medical examination conducted by an AME. So this way, if you get your medical, for example, and you've had some issue, but you've got the medical, you're going to have maybe, and then there was some issue determined later on, you may have a few more rights to protect your medical certificate with this piece of legislation or change. Eliminate and reduce aircraft registration backlog. Requires the FAA to take needed actions to reduce and maintain the aircraft registration and recording backlog of the Civil Aviation Registry so that an average applicants are processed no later than 10 business days after receipt. Again, I've heard stories where weeks and months have gone by where a registration needed to be changed and it hadn't been changed. And so hopefully this will alleviate that problem. Ensuring safe landings during off-airport operations. So this is going to prohibit the FAA from applying a specific regulation in any manner that requires a pilot to continue a landing that is unsafe. Case in point, the purpose of this provision is to prevent future FAA enforcement actions such as the case against Trent Palmer and making an inspection pass at an off-airport strip that he chose not to land on after inspecting the surface conditions. So good. This piece of legislation in here or rule will hopefully make it so that pilots aren't forced to feel compelled to land even though they inspected the airport area, off-airport area, and saw that it wasn't a safe place to land. The last major bullet here or topic is modernization of special airworthiness certificates, or this Mosaic proposal or a rules proposal from the FAA for basically expanding the light sport aircraft and pilot community. So the Act requires the FAA to issue a final rule on proposed changes by early mid-2025 for sports pilots and sports aircraft with effective dates sometimes after that. Basically, it's going to loosen some restrictions. The comment period for the changes, proposed changes for this Mosaic were done in March of 2024, and listed on the next few pages are some of the proposed changes that will come into effect under Mosaic. So again, Mosaic is going to affect all aircraft with special airworthiness certificates, all light sport aircraft, experimental amateur-built airplanes, and warbirds. Lots of new features and benefits are going to be allowed, but no doubt it will raise price points on LSAs. One of the big ones is gross weight expected to increase for LSAs from 1,320 pounds land or 1,430 pounds water to up to 3,000 pounds depending upon the aircraft design. Max clean stall speeds increased from 45 knots to 54 knots. So that's going to be very interesting. There are plenty of aircraft out there that are standard airworthiness certificate generated that have stall speeds, clean stall speeds that are below these numbers. So that may open the world for some of the normal standard airworthiness aircraft to maybe be classified under or meet the requirements for LSA aircraft. Max seating of the LSA aircraft goes from just 2 seats to 4 seats. However, if a sports pilot is flying it, then only 1 passenger can be carried. If a private pilot with appropriate medical flying it, then all 4 seats can be occupied. LSA aircraft can go from only being offered in fixed gear to also retractable gear. In addition, LSA aircraft can go from only ground adjustable props to in-flight adjustable props. Also, light sports aircraft can go from a max airspeed of 120 knots at full power, which is the current rule, to a max speed that matches all other aircraft below 10,000 feet, i.e. 250 knots. Rotary, fully built gyroplanes will now be allowed under this Mosaic or light sport aircraft. Similarly, LSAs can now be electric or hybrid instead of just reciprocating engines as they were previously limited to. Again, turbine-powered LSAs are also allowed, and they basically removed the restriction or constraint that an LSA has to be a single-engine airplane. Thus, it potentially could be a multi-engine airplane. However, how a pilot qualifies is still to be determined. LSA aircraft are granted some form of aerial work as well, as long as commercial pilot is a pilot in command, although not for carrying passengers or cargo, possibly for inspection work, like pipeline inspections, infrastructure inspection, things like that. An aircraft like this could be used, as long as there's a commercially rated pilot with the appropriate medical certificate on board. And finally, the FAA's notice of proposed rulemaking expressed support for sports pilots to fly at night, but with making sure they have proper training and a logbook endorsement to do so. But this will require medical or basic med, which conflicts with the purpose of a sports pilot certificate where you only need his driver's license. And lastly, there's maintenance and TBO's proposed changes in Mosaic. There are several objections from the maintenance organization or community with these changes. Some of the proposed changes could cause a loss of privileges for LSA owners who have taken training to perform basic maintenance on their own aircraft. So to kind of summarize, much of the news from the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act is very positive for the general aviation community. It will take some time, however, for parts of it to go into effect. In many cases, the legislature gives the FAA some period of time before it must codify new rules and regulations. So, for example, with these Mosaic rules, for example, it's not expected until sometime in 2025, early spring to summer of 2025, where some of these Mosaic rules will be defined, and they may have effective dates that go beyond that. So those are some of the highlights for the general aviation world with the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act. There's a lot of goodies in there, particularly as it relates to light sport and basic med, as well as just overall funding for improvements to some of our the smaller GA airports. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified on my next video.